known for? Like, when you were in school, when you were in a job, when you were in your family, in a neighborhood, in different places, what were you known for? Like, what did people say, I go to that person because of that? Or I love that that person is so good at that. Or whenever I need, I go there. What were you known for? Anybody? What were you known for? John, what are you known for?
Crazy John.
Crazy John. Always has a joke.
Wow.
Always can talk. Carl, what were you known for?
Consistency.
Consistency. Carl was always early. That's what I know Carl for. Ron, what are you known for? Sports. Particular one?
Baseball.
Baseball. Okay? What are you known for?
I don't want to know.
I don't want to know. William, what are you known for?
Music theory.
Music theory. You're known for music theory. Oh, shoot. I was known for a couple things in my younger years. My grandfather had these really cool ears, like his actual ears. They were a little larger than normal, and they had really large earlobes. He had the detached earlobes, and so just really these long hanging ears. And he had this ability of being able to wiggle his ears, just dramatically. So he taught my sister and I to wiggle our ears. And when he did it, we started doing it just for fun, and our friends would be like, do that thing. Like, just, like hands-free, wiggling. They're like, do that thing, wiggle your ear. So people would come up to us and they'd be like, wait, do it. And so we wiggle our ears. Do it. We got closer. I mean, you can't really tell from there. We'll do it later. So, in middle school, my friend Jason and I, we had a competition to see who could write the smallest. That was in the days of dictation tests in English class. And so we would compete. We sat right next to each other, and we would compete for how small we could write.
You got that from your teacher?
Oh, our teachers hated us for this because they couldn't see it.
Oh,
But
wow.
we had our mechanical pencils, and we would write and see how few lines we could fit the whole dictation test onto. And we'd love to show our friends, and they'd be like, no way, you can't write that small, and I can hardly read it. So we kind of got known for our tiny handwriting. What would you say Jesus is known for? Just think. What would Jesus be known for?
Healing.
Healing, teaching,
Storytelling.
storytelling. What's that? Miracles,
Grace.
grace,
Forgiveness.
forgiveness.
Sacrifice.
Good, we got lots of things we know Jesus for. In the Gospels, Jesus gets known for his miracles. That's why people flock to him. They saw Jesus do this, and they're like, wow, I need to find out more about this. And then they hear Jesus, oh, Jesus did this, and so they run over and, you just healed him. Well, come and heal my child, or come and heal my mom, come and heal me. And as this fed on itself, more and more people saw the miracle, or heard about the miracle, and they just went running, and they'd be like, Jesus, do that thing you did over there, do it again. We want to see the miracle. Because the miracles are so exciting. And we know Jesus for his miracles too. I mean, we say, oh, he's the guy who turned the water into wine. Oh, right, we all know it. Jesus is the guy who walked on, right, who calmed the... See, we know all the stories. I mean, he fed how many people? 5,000 people with a child. We know all the stories. He healed Peter's mother-in-law of fever. He healed the guy with a withered hand. He stumped all the people with his amazing messages and speeches and wisdom and understanding. We know all these stories and these miracles about Jesus. The crazy thing is, Jesus did not want to be known for his miracles. He actually gets frustrated by people who want him to do miracles. Because he's like, wait, yes, that's good. Yes, that's the power of God. Yes, that's God's glory on display. Yes, it gets the message across. But no, that's not why I want you to know me. Don't know me for the stories and the miracles and these great things that I do. Know me for something else. The something else that Jesus wants to move us to believe in him is what we're looking at in the Gospel of John today. So we're going to look at two questions. The first question is, what does Jesus hope moves us to believe in him? And then, what kind of believing does Jesus want from us? If it's not believing in the miracles, if it's not believing in the pizzazz, what does he want from us if it's not that? There's no better place, of course, to look than the Gospel of John, which is what we're looking at for the next few weeks. It's like John was tailor-made to teach us how to believe. It's like he wrote a manual for, if you want to know how to believe, here's how to believe. And without spoiling the whole thing, at the end of John's book, he actually writes this kind of very thing. He explains why he wrote his book, and it's these couple of verses. He says, all these miraculous signs are written so that you may continue to believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing in him, you will have life by the power of his name. The entire book is written with the goal of us being so convinced that Jesus is who he is, that we live like it. And we saw last week, that's what belief is. It is being so convinced of something that we live like it. John's book was written so that we might be convinced, so that we might believe, so that we might live just like that. Believing is just being all in. All in to who Jesus is and what Jesus is doing. Anything else is not what John's talking about. So back to Jesus, not wanting to be known for those miracles and all those things he does. Here's what Jesus is dealing with as we lead up to the story that we're looking at today. So just a quick recap of from the beginning of John until now. It reveals something absolutely fascinating about this whole issue of Jesus and miracles and all this going on. So right at the beginning, Jesus calls his disciples. He calls Peter and Andrew and James and John and Philip. When he gets to Nathanael, it's like the story pauses, and they camp on Nathanael, because Jesus says to Nathanael something prophetic, something surprising that Nathanael knew. Nobody else knows this unless you're supernatural. And he says, Jesus, how did you know that about me? And Jesus is like, wait a minute. You're going to believe in me because I said something fancy and surprising about you? That's just the beginning. Nathanael believes because Jesus does something miraculous. The next thing Jesus goes and does is he goes to the temple. He goes to the temple and he has this famous moment where he's frustrated because everybody's treating God's house not like it's supposed to be treated. So he turns over the tables, he makes a whip and he's snapping at people, he's throwing money all over the place, and people realize, wait a minute. The Old Testament described that God's Savior would be one who has a passion for God's house, like a deep passion. That's what Jesus is doing. And tons of people believed because of that. Jesus did some miraculous things, and people believed in the miracles. Stick with me. A few more things that happened. The next thing is that we find Jesus talking with Nicodemus. We looked at this in detail last week, but Nicodemus and Jesus have this long conversation. If you remember, did Jesus do any miracle in this conversation, in this story with Nicodemus? No. They just talk. No miracle. And Nicodemus walks away with no understanding. We have no understanding that he actually believes at that point. There's no clarity about that. So Jesus goes on. He actually leaves Jerusalem. He goes to the place of Samaria. He meets a woman at the well in Samaria, and they start talking, which is not supposed to happen. Jesus, a Jew, is not supposed to talk to a Samaritan woman. It's culturally an abomination. People just didn't do that because they're people, they're kin, we're just kind of at war with each other. So even having a conversation is bad. But in the sequence of this conversation, Jesus says something to her that is revealing, that is kind of secretive, that nobody else knows. It would be an outsider to the area. Yet Jesus knows it, and she says, "Hey, you must be a prophet to know that." And Jesus reveals to her that he's the Messiah. She believes. She believes because he said something miraculous to her. So she goes back to her whole village. She runs back and she tells them all these things. This is crazy. She runs back, she tells them all these things that Jesus said, "I think I might have found the Messiah." Tells them all the stories. They want to know more. They hear from Jesus and they believe. No miracle, no pizzazz, no healing. They believe because of what they've heard about Jesus. Right after that, Jesus goes north and he goes back up to Cana, the place where he did the water and wine whole thing. Jesus goes back up there and he meets a guy on the road who asks him, "Oh, come and do that thing. Come and heal my son because I need that healing that I've heard about." And here's what Jesus says to that guy. He says, "Will you never believe in me unless you see miraculous signs and wonders?" And the you that he's talking about isn't just you, the guy. He's talking about all of you. It's like plural you. He's like, "Will you people not believe unless I do these cool things among you?" That's not what I want to be known for. I want to be known for something else. Jesus had earned the reputation of being the miracle God. He had the trust of people, he had the interest of people because he was healing, he was doing fancy things, he was doing surprising things that grabbed people's attention, made them follow him, made them seek him out, made them excited to know who this guy is. And yet he didn't want to be known as the miracle guy. Of all the groups that had encountered Jesus up to this point, there was only one group who had believed in Jesus, not because of a miracle. And it was that whole village of people from an area that were just kind of enemy people. They were like the least expected people to believe in Jesus. And they didn't get the miracle, yet they still believed. What moved them to believe? Wasn't the miracle, wasn't the fancy things, wasn't the amazing stuff. What moved them to believe was that the words of Jesus became true to them. The person of Jesus became true to them. They believed that Jesus' words were worth it. And they followed based on Jesus' words. Jesus said it. Jesus claimed it. Jesus proclaimed it. Jesus announced it. Jesus promised it. And they believed because Jesus said it. Now they saw Jesus do some true things. They saw Jesus say it and back it up. They saw how it connected to other things. Jesus spoke reality and truth into their lives. It penetrated them and became part of who they are. They realized that Jesus was describing how to get their needs satisfied. And they believed based on that. So often when we have cool and exciting experiences, when we do something really fun and interesting, something that really gets us going, what tends to happen after a couple weeks?
Sure.
Kind of wears off. It's not as exciting as it was before. And so, what do we look for? We look for the next cool thing. Like, "Oh, but I did that. Now what if I did that? I did a 5-mile hike before and saw 8 waterfalls. What if I do a 9-mile hike and see 16 waterfalls? I jumped off a 4-foot diving board. What if I jump off an 8-foot diving board?" I mean, we want the next cool thing. We want the next exciting thing because this is kind of worn off. And I need more to feed that feeling of excitement. When Jesus does a miracle, and if we believe based on Jesus' miracles alone, we need another miracle all the time. Because, feeding 4,000 people wasn't enough. I want to see 5,000. Healing one person, no, I need you to heal the whole city of people. Answering that prayer, I need you to answer this bigger prayer. And we always need more. Jesus, don't know me, don't believe in me because of those fancy things. Believe in me for another reason. Because my words are worth it. Because I have the words, as Peter says, you have the words of eternal life. To whom else should we go? Jesus has some of the deepest words to meet some of our deepest needs. So how does this work out? How does this play out in the current episode that we kind of came up to? When this guy comes to Jesus, when he asks him, please heal my son. Well, Jesus is taking a trip. We started with the miracle of the water and the wine in Cana up north. He came down to Jerusalem, called the disciples, and went to the temple and did all that, and met Nicodemus. And then he went up to Samaria partway. Now he's come full circle. He's come all the way back to Cana. So they call it kind of the Cana cycle. This is this whole cycle of things that Jesus has done. He's sort of wrapping up this cycle at this point. It's almost like the ending story to this little mini-series that Jesus is in. He gets back up to Cana, and there's a guy who comes from nearby Capernaum. That's like from here to Exeter. So not really nearby, but sort of nearby. They didn't have cars, obviously, so it was a little farther than nearby. But he comes there. He's a Roman officer. He has some resources behind him, so maybe it makes the trip a little bit easier. But he's also somebody who is desperate. He's desperate because his son needs healing. We find out his son is near death. So this guy is coming to Jesus as a last resort. Here's the story. As Jesus traveled through Galilee, he came to Cana, where he had turned the water into wine. There was a government official in nearby Capernaum whose son was very sick. When he heard that Jesus had come from Judea to Galilee, he went and begged Jesus to come to Capernaum to heal his son, who was about to die. Jesus asked, "Will you never believe in me unless you see miraculous signs and wonders?" The official pleaded, "Lord, please come now before my little boy dies." Then Jesus told him, "Go back home. Your son will live." And the man believed what Jesus said and started home. While the man was on his way, some of his servants met him and the news that his son was alive and well. He asked them when the boy had begun to get better. And they replied, "Yesterday afternoon at 1 o'clock, his fever suddenly disappeared." Then the father realized that that was the very time Jesus had told him, "Your son will live." And he and his entire household believed in Jesus. Does the father believe? Yeah. How many times? Two. He believes. He doesn't believe like you turn it on and it's on. I mean, it's like, I believe, and let's go. Let's keep moving. He believes twice. So what's going on? What's the belief look like? What's moving him to believe? Remember, we got this Roman officer. He's coming from nearby. He's got his servants. He's got others who are accompanying him and helping him in this whole journey. He comes to Jesus. He begs for Jesus to come and heal my son. He's desperate. He's sick. He needs this kind of healing. What does the officer, what does he ask Jesus to do? To heal my son. And how does he ask him to do it? I want you to come to my house and heal my son. Does Jesus go to his house? No, Jesus doesn't. I mean, it's great. Jesus is like, "I'm not coming, but your son's going to live." And what's the father's response? He believes. He believes based on what? On words. Jesus pronounces something. Jesus says it. Jesus claims it and promises it, and the man believes based on Jesus' words. It's one thing to believe in what we see. It's a whole different thing to believe in what we don't see. The verse that Bill read at the beginning of the scripture reading, believing is the assurance of what we hope for, the evidence of what we do not see. That's the kind of believing that Jesus is wanting for us to discover. Believing not in Jesus' fancy stuff and amazing things that he does, but believing in Jesus and his words and his person and who he is and the integrity of all that fitting together for my life right now. Believing in Jesus because of who he is and what he says. What happens after the Father believes the first time? He heads home, he goes back, and he runs into his servants. He starts from home like 20 miles back. It's a lot of time to think, perhaps many miles and wonder, is what Jesus said going to happen? Because he's not coming with me. He said it. Now I've got to go find out if it's true. As the Father's on his way, he meets his servants. And I just imagine this conversation. His servants rush out to meet him, and he's probably wondering, why are you coming out to meet me? I'm not even home yet. Oh, but your son as well. What do you mean my son as well? How did that happen? They start comparing notes back and forth. They start describing what happened. The Father surely tells them about his encounter with Jesus. Then they start talking about, well, what time did that happen? Oh, it was 1 o'clock. 1 o'clock? That's when I was talking to Jesus. And they fit it all together. And the people all realize, and his family, the servants, all these people realize the miracle happened, and we believe. The word was proclaimed, and we believe. And they fit all this together, and it's the miracle that validates the words of Jesus. And the words of Jesus are enhanced by the miracle. They're working together. But believing in Jesus and his words and his promises are what Jesus is hoping moves us to believe. When Kimberly and I were in college, we went to a small college, Westmont, as we've talked about a number of times. Small college, it was larger, it was smaller than both of our high schools. So it's about 1,000 people. So it's pretty easy to know a lot of names and certainly recognize a lot of faces around campus. It's also really easy to get to know a lot of the professors and the staff and some of the people who are in charge of things. We had the chance to get to know and have a class with the gentleman who was the provost of the school at the time. And so the two of us had just taken a class with him. It was neat. We read a lot of things and got to have some neat conversations with him. Through a couple of occasions after we graduated, we got to know he and his wife, oftentimes connected with the college. And by that point, he was the college president. And so, we knew him as the college president, and we would go to college things, and we might see him there. When we decided to move out of town, a couple years later, they called us and said, we'd like to take you to dinner. And we said, but why? You're the president, and why? Anyway, we went to dinner, and they were so friendly and casual and fun and sincere and humorous and relaxed. It was an amazing time. And as we reflected on it, we realized he was no longer in that time the college president. He was somebody we were talking with. Jesus doesn't want us to know him just for his titles and his miracles and the things that stand out and shine. Those are good, and those are helpful. Jesus wants us to know him because of who he is, and what he says is true. May Jesus penetrate us, deepen our faith, grow our faith as we read through the Gospel of John, as we see Jesus move and live in the world, and may that faith grow stronger and deeper in us. Let's pray.